Okay, welcome everyone to the first video lecture of English 091 Critical Reading. If you haven't seen me before on campus or if we've never met, my name's Ryan Griffiths. I'm the guy who's been sending you emails and putting all the information up on our Canvas website. I'm coming to you from my home office because of the pandemic situation. So you've got me, you've got my spider sidekick over there, pet tarantula. So if you see him moving around throughout this lecture or in any future lectures, just ignore him. He usually doesn't move too much when there's noise and things happening in the room, but you never know. If you're scared of spiders, I'm sorry. Just don't look over in that area, I guess. So for today's lecture, or I guess I should say for this week's lecture, I want to kick off the class by talking about the value of critical reading, because we're going to be spending a whole class learning how to do critical reading, how to apply it to different sorts of texts from different genres. For example, fiction, science, social science, philosophy. And so to me, it made sense to start things off by just explaining why it's a worthwhile skill to cultivate. But before we do that, I do want to go over some things on our course syllabus first together. You can find the course syllabus. Hopefully you can find it, if I got it up there right, on our Canvas website too. And you can read along with me if you want, but I do want to take a few minutes to just read through some parts of it and elaborate on some things. So if there was anything that was confusing, hopefully that'll clear things up. Let me get it pulled up on my computer here. Oh no. Okay. Here we go. So, as I said before, this is English 091, Critical Reading. And this course endeavors to impart the skill of critical reading, which we can also define as active reading or demanding reading. We might also think of it as analytical reading. Through various readings from a diverse multitude of writers, the course is also going to explore not just how to engage in critical reading, but why critical reading is a worthwhile skill to cultivate, as I said or mentioned earlier. So throughout the semester, we will develop strategies and habits that will help you to locate, read, analyze, and synthesize, which taken all together denote an understanding of academic materials from a broad range of disciplines. So some of the course objectives and learning outcomes are to be able to employ pre-reading techniques such as skimming, annotating, and utilizing a book's table of contents and index. And I know some of those things might seem kind of self-explanatory or simple, but we're going to go over them anyway because there's the sort of obvious way to go about doing those things and then the smart way to go about doing things. So I'm sure we all would know, if put to the test, how to skim a book. We've all skimmed before when we had a bunch of texts to cover for a research paper or anything like that, or if we were just trying to get through a chapter in a textbook in school. We've all skimmed once or twice, but there is a technique to doing it that ensures that you're going to get the useful stuff out of that book when you're skimming, the valuable things. So that'll be one thing that we talk about. Another course outcome will be for you to be able to critically and creatively engage with texts through summarization and synthesis. So we're going to talk quite a bit about how when you're reading something, it helps to visualize it as you having a conversation with that author. It's not just you, and I think the joke is staring at a piece of paper with words printed on it and hallucinating while you're reading it. I've heard people say that that's what reading is. It's really you taking something away from the author, whatever it is that they're trying to say, but also you giving something back to it. As you're reading a text, you can be critical of it, asking questions of it, taking things that you're getting from that author and incorporating them into your overall encyclopedia of knowledge that you keep stored inside of your head. And another outcome would be to navigate through the writings of different academic disciplines and understand how they differ. Again, I mentioned that earlier. And also to be able to articulate your comprehension of a text through writing. So there will be some written assignments. There are 4 major writing assignments in this class, and we'll talk about those in a minute. I don't want to get ahead of myself for the 3rd time already. Course textbooks. So the only book that's required for this course is 50 Essays, a portable anthology by Samuel Cohen. If you haven't gotten this already from the UIS bookstore, be sure to pick it up as soon as you can. You can also, I'm pretty sure, get it online for significantly cheaper than you'd find it at the UIS bookstore. Just wherever you get it from, make sure that it is the 5th edition, because the older editions have different essays and things like that. And yeah, the 50 essays in this text are very diverse in terms of the disciplines that they're covering, science, history, creative fiction, in terms of when they were written. So there's some older texts from like the 1700s, 1800s, things that we might consider classics. And then there's also newer writings from people who are still alive and with us today and commenting on current events and culture and things like that. So get a hold of this as soon as you can. And I mentioned in the homepage of our Canvas course that if you don't have this book yet and class is kicking off, you can usually find the individual essays themselves as PDFs online somewhere. Just Google search the name of the essay, especially the older ones that are sort of classics. You'll be able to find them somewhere to read them. Not all of them, not in every case, so I do urge you to get the book, but just keep in mind that that is an option too. There's also some books that I'm going to recommend, but they aren't required. One of them is called How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler. It's a good book to read, but we're going to cover a lot of what it covers through lecture in this class. So I didn't really make it a required reading, but our course is kind of structured off those different levels of reading that he talks about in that book. Pre-reading, critical reading, synthesis reading. So if you want to pick that up, you can, but don't feel like you have to. Also, if you have access to a dictionary, or in this day and age, you can Google the definition of a word, that's always helpful as well. So let's talk about the course assignments. So one of your major assignments isn't really a major assignment, it's something that you'll be doing each week in this class. Normally, if we had been meeting on campus, this would have taken the form of a journal. I would have students in this class at the beginning of each day take out their journal and they'd write a reflection on the readings, or they would write a reflective response to a question that I'd put on the board, something like that. But since we can't do that, it's slightly restructured. So for the weekly responses, each week you will respond to a prompt that has to do with the lecture, as well as a reflection on one of the week's readings. Both the responses and the reflections should be substantive, at least one paragraph, not just one sentence or even one word. And they should show that you have engaged with and thought about the week's lecture and the readings. And each weekly response will be worth 2 points for a total of 25 points altogether at the end of the class. So when you're thinking about each week doing these responses, if you miss one, it's not a big deal. Maybe you got behind that week. But if you miss more than one, it does add up, because 25 points out of 100 is a good chunk of the final grade for this class. So do try to keep up with the weekly responses. And they're kind of easy points as long as you remember to do them. In addition to those, as I mentioned earlier, there's going to be 4 major writing assignments throughout the semester. The first one will be a summary. So the assignment will be to write a summary covering one of the assigned readings from Cohen's 50 essays. And this assignment is just to demonstrate that you've learned how to identify an author's message or thesis, and that you grasp the subject enough to be able to state it in a condensed form in your own words. And the importance of this assignment, because again, this is one of those things kind of like pre-reading and skimming that might seem self-evident at first, but the skill to take away from being able to write an effective summary is that you can restate an author's argument as your own. It shows that you've processed the information that they've given you and that you can apply it to whatever your own circumstances are, your own situations. And it shows that you've actually engaged with and sort of absorbed that text. And that's useful, especially when it comes to writing essays that incorporate multiple other authors. If you're doing a research paper, for example, you want to know that you actually understand the other sources that you're citing in that research paper and that you can use them for yourself. The second assignment will be writing a review. So similar to the summary essay, this assignment will ask you not only to concisely summarize a chosen text, again out of the 50 authors anthology, in order to get a main point across, but also to make an argument as to why reading the text is worth the audience's time. So you're kind of writing a sales pitch for one of the essays that you found particularly interesting. You will include what you find fascinating about the text and why you think it's important. And both the summary assignment and the review assignment will be worth 12.5 points. And let me scroll down a bit. Okay. The third essay will be the rhetorical analysis. And because understanding how a text says what it does, as well as thoroughly understanding what it says, it's an important part of what you will learn in this class to be able to conduct a rhetorical analysis on one of the assigned readings. You will be asked to explain how the overall structure of the text, the language that the author uses, and the images, examples, and arguments that they make all combine to create the finished work. Rhetorical analysis asks you to engage a bit more deeply with the text than the writing of a summary does or the writing of a review, and so the assignment is worth 25 points. So that one will be worth more of your overall grade, as will the final project. And the final project, so because the final goal of critical reading is to be able to effectively use the knowledge gained thereby and turn it towards the creation of something new, namely your own work, your final project is going to reflect this. You're going to make use of multiple texts, in other words, synthesizing them, and we'll talk more about synthesis in an upcoming lecture, in order to formulate your own thesis or your own main point. This can take the form of any of the essays that we're going to be reading this semester, so you can write an argumentative essay, a personal narrative, or even a short story. I've had some students in the past get really creative with this project. They've written poetry, things like that. And we will workshop these projects together as we draw near the end of the semester and this assignment comes up to be due. So I didn't really update that last sentence there in the description of the final project because it says that we're going to have to share what we're working on in class and we're not going to be meeting in class. But we will find a way to work around that and do it through our Canvas page too. So there will be a period of almost like peer workshopping where we'll cover what each of us has been working on and give suggestions, advice, or just opinions on those texts. And we'll probably make that one of our weekly discussion things. So going down, grading policy. Assignments will be assessed according to criteria, which you will receive through Canvas or through assignment guidelines that will be handed out. They will be due by the beginning of class on the assigned due date. Late assignments, I generally don't accept them unless you let me know before the due date of a reason for the delay. And I handle instances like those on a case-by-case basis. I'm usually pretty easygoing with turning in things late, again, as long as you let me know why beforehand. If I don't hear from you and that due date comes and goes, then I can't really do anything to help you. But if you email me the night before, and just, even if it's as honest as saying, hey, I got kind of swamped with other classes, with other work, can I have a few extra days on this? I'm probably going to let you have those few extra days. Plagiarism and academic dishonesty, we don't have to spend too much time on that. Everybody knows not to plagiarize. In my experience, it isn't usually done intentionally. It usually comes in when people are trying to quote something from a source that they're using in a paper, or even in this class where you're trying to quote sections from one of the readings that you'll be writing a response to. And it's just a matter of being able to cite things properly. And when I receive your essays, if I see that there's a problem of that nature in those essays, I will make sure to mark it and let you know for future reference. Attendance and participation. Yeah, so given that this course will be hosted remotely, staying up to date with the readings and discussion questions will be integral to success in this class. Responses to lecture questions will always be due a week after they are posted. So the pattern or the schedule that I'm kind of setting here and that I'm hoping will work is that on Monday morning at 8 o'clock, the module for that week will be opened. You'll be able to look at that week's lecture and you'll be able to see the questions there that I'm asking you to respond to. And then you will have all the way till that next Monday to do those weekly readings. Responses must also be thoughtful and show that you have read and pondered on the assigned text for that week. A lack of participation or engagement with the readings will be reflected in your discussion question responses grade. You can read the section on academic accommodations if there's anything you need in there. And then we can see the course calendar at the end of the syllabus. And I do encourage you to refer to that frequently because that's where you're going to see the assigned readings for each week. So for example, we can see here in week 1, we're going to be talking about the worth of reading. It should say the worth of critical reading because we'll see that critical reading and just reading are kind of different. And that the assigned reading from the 50 Essays anthology is Learning to Read and Write by Frederick Douglass. And that's actually an excerpt taken from Douglass's larger book, which is called Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass, you can read the description of his life at the beginning of the essay. He was a runaway slave in the 1800s who became a leader in the abolitionist movement. Really interesting reading. I hope you like it. And scrolling down, you can see the assigned readings for each week and also in bold the writing assignments that are due for that week. So the first major writing assignment, the summary, will be due 4 weeks from now, and so on. All of the readings are typically about 10 to 30 pages. I try not to assign too much at once, but that's so that you can take your time with each one. It shouldn't take too awfully long to cover them, even on certain weeks near the end of the semester when there's 3 or 4 readings for a week and they're kind of longer. And if you have any questions on the syllabus or on the course calendar, please don't hesitate to email me and let me know. And I think that pretty much covers it for the course syllabus. So going back to what I was saying earlier, now that we have all the sort of particulars out of the way, I want to spend the rest of this lecture talking about the worth of critical reading. You're being asked to take this course as part of your degree requirements, whatever those may be. And I think this is a fun course to take because or at least to teach, because there's students coming into it from all sorts of different areas of interests and disciplines. Sometimes we have those who are planning to be English majors or history majors. Then we have computer sciences people and regular sciences people, all sorts of different interests. And that brings a lot to the table when we go about discussing the different readings that we'll be doing. So because of that, I also want to make sure that everybody has an understanding of why UIS at least believes this class to be valuable. Because every time I teach this course, I kind of ask at the beginning, who enjoys reading? Or I should say, who enjoys reading for its own sake, not for anything practical like information that you could get out of it. Just sitting down and reading a story, maybe a work of fiction, maybe history, something that you're just doing for the pleasure of doing it. And about every class, I get about half the people say that they enjoy it, and the other half say that they don't like reading or that they don't enjoy it. And I ask that because I think it's important that we all start on the same foot of why this class is valuable. Because I do believe that your time is valuable, and I'm sure that you believe it too. I really think it's an interesting concept for this movie that came out a few years ago. I don't know if any of you have seen it, called In Time. I think it stars Justin Timberlake, but it's like this dystopian science fiction movie where time is the new currency. So if you want to buy a cup of coffee or something, it takes 3 minutes off of your life instead of $3. And it's a neat thing where you have the rich people who become eternally young, they live forever, and then you have the poor people who are just dying within a week. I like the concept though, because there's some deeper truth to it. I think each moment of your life does have value, and you want to know that when you're spending moments of your life doing something, you're going to get a return on your investment, so to say, the same way that you would expect to get a good return on something that you spend money on. If you spend $20 on a pizza, you want it to taste delicious and good and not like a piece of cardboard. If you spend 20 hours taking a critical reading course, you want to know that you're going to be able to walk away with a worthwhile skill. And I'm here to say that spending time on reading and learning how to do critical reading is valuable. And even when it's not a practical book, even when it's a book that you're reading to take something abstract away from it, something not concrete. Books that ask about the big ideas, if you're reading a work of philosophy, or if you're reading a novel that has a really important theme or really speaks to an issue that's going on in the real world. Books like that. Because your minutes are valuable, and you shouldn't feel that you're wasting them in this class, and I hope you don't feel that way. And when we're thinking about whether or not critical reading is valuable or whether or not taking this class is worthwhile, I think that there are really two answers to give to that. One is that when you think about your brain, your mind, it is like a muscle, and it's worthwhile to exercise that muscle. And reading texts do that, particularly reading texts or books that are difficult. A good book should stretch your mind. It shouldn't be something that you can pick up and read once and say, okay, I got it all. It should be something that you do have to pause every once in a while. Or maybe you get through the first reading and you don't really understand it all the way. That shows you that your mind's being stretched. It's being exercised. Mortimer Adler, in How to Read a Book, talks about that. So we engage in critical reading to exercise the mind as opposed to passive reading. And you can be a passive reader as well, and that's more of what I was describing earlier, somebody who just opens up a book and is like a blank slate, and all the information sort of washes over them, and at the end of the day they shut the book and they remember some of the important stuff, but it didn't leave much of an impression on them. Critical reading, as I said before, is more of like having a conversation with the author. It's about not only receiving something from the text, but also giving something back. And making notes helps with that. I usually write in the margins of any text that I happen to be reading. You can see that there, kind of. And sometimes it's just things that the reading has made me think about. Sometimes I disagree with what I'm reading, and so I'll argue in the margins. I usually make more annotations in the sides when I disagree with the text than when I agree with it, just because I feel like I'm more invested in what I'm reading and picking apart the author's arguments, things like that. So that's one way to answer that question of why reading is a worthwhile skill to cultivate, because it stretches your mind. Another answer you could give, and the shorter answer would be to say, read Frederick Douglass. There's a reason that the Frederick Douglass reading was the first one assigned for this course, and that we're talking about it this week while we're going over why reading is a worthwhile skill. Because when you read this essay, you see just how much it changed his life to pick up the skill of reading, and later on the skill of writing. He describes places where he starts picking up different documents, learning how to read. At one part he says, "I read them over and over again with unabated interest. They gave tongue to interesting thoughts of my own soul, which had frequently lashed through my mind and died away for want of utterance." In other words, he was learning how to express thoughts and feelings that he had had before, that he had already knew, but that he just didn't know how to say. Sometimes you'll have that experience with reading. You'll be going over the text and you realize, oh, I've thought about that before. I've just never really been able to phrase it that way. And so reading something new and something challenging not only gives you access to new information that you didn't have before, it also sort of reforms what you've already known, or what you've always known, in a new way, and in a way that you'll be able to communicate that more effectively yourself. So I think a lot of people have all sorts of ideas that kind of float through their minds every day, but they've never been able to actually articulate. I'm one of those people. I spend a lot of time just kind of thinking about things, you might even say daydreaming, but there's not really any practical results from that. And it's happened to me multiple times where I'll be reading something and I realize, oh, that describes what I'm talking about. I'm going to have to remember this text, because if I ever want to explain to somebody this thing that I've always thought, I know that that author said the same thing and that they explained it well, and so I can reference that author when I'm making my own point. Some other things that Frederick Douglass talks about is that there's an interesting part where he describes how he goes through a period where he kind of begins to hate life and hate the world and hate mankind, because as he's reading, he learns about all these atrocities that have been done throughout history. He learns about slavery, and he almost seems to suggest that at one point that ignorance was bliss, kind of like the Matrix movie. If anybody's ever seen the Matrix movie, the guy, after he wakes up out of the computer simulation, he wants to go back. He wants to forget all the horrible things that he's learned. And Douglass kind of talks about that as well. He says, "At times I would feel that learning to read had been a curse rather than a blessing. It had given me a view of my wretched condition without the remedy." But then he goes on to say that the light broke upon him by degrees. He learned what should be his by right. He learned about ethics and liberty and things like that. And by learning how to read those works, he was able to more clearly articulate that he wanted those things for himself that had been deprived to him by the slave owner. So reading Frederick Douglass is a good example of why reading is a worthwhile thing to do, and why I think this class has value. But I would also encourage you that if you feel, I'd say that nobody not even just in this class, but in any classes that you've taken. I don't feel that any student should have to feel that they're wasting their time. I want you to feel that you're getting something from this, that you're benefiting from it. And if you don't feel that way, feel free enough to be honest to let me know, because it's sort of this class's job, and to an extent, my job as well, to make a pitch as to why you're here, right? Like why this is worthwhile. Because I believe it is. I love reading. I always have. I feel that I would be a completely different person if I wasn't an avid reader. I mean, you can see all the books behind me. I've sort of collected them over the years. There's still a whole bunch over there against that other wall too. I'm also kind of a hoarder, so that's why I can't really get rid of things. But yeah, I don't really know who I would be without having been a reader. There's one author, a man named Cicero, said one time that he learned how to be a responsible citizen, a good person, brave soldier, all these different things from reading about people who had been responsible, good, brave, things like that. So it's sort of a character building exercise as well. When you read a whole bunch of different things, you can take elements from the different people that you read about that you like and sort of incorporate them into your own life. So you become, in the end, sort of this walking amalgam of the best of all the people that you've read about. You can pick up on habits, traits. There's one book back there, Benjamin Franklin, his autobiography, which was really interesting to read because he talks about his daily schedule. I've never been a morning person, which incidentally is why this class being online, I might be a little bit more active than I would have been if we were meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning and I was like dead on my feet and drinking mass amounts of coffee. But I've never been a morning person. And so in that autobiography, he gives advice about how to start your day. He had like a really strict schedule that he went by. And I've incorporated that daily routine, that morning routine, to help me to some extent with being able to wake up and get going in the morning. I'm still not saying I'm not perfect at that, but at least it's helped a little bit. So that's one example. And maybe you guys can think of an example in your lives as well, where you've read something about a person or about a character. It might even be a fictional character. In a lot of ways it is. Fictional characters can motivate us and inspire us just as much, if not more so, than real life characters. It's why children dress up as superheroes and Disney movie characters on Halloween, because there's something in those characters that they recognize that they want to be, that they want to aspire to, and so they dress up as that and they try to be that. But so I think hopefully I'm speaking to something that everybody has some experience with or has at least felt before. And yeah, so critical reading, it's not just stretching your mind, it's also character building. It's a form of self-betterment, in much the same way that English 101 and 102 are, in terms of how they're teaching you to be able to articulate the arguments you want to make clearly so that people understand what you're saying. Because having a good idea is great, but if you can't communicate it, you might as well not have it at all, right? And being able to communicate something even improperly or imprecisely is better than not being able to communicate it at all. So it's a step-by-step pattern. And reading helps with that too, because when you do a lot of reading and when you read a wide variety of different writers and authors, you pick up on their style of writing as well, and you can incorporate that into your own style. Maybe you're not a very good writer. Maybe you're not very organized in your essays. I was never very organized in research paper essays. I'd always just kind of vomit out the citations and rearrange them messily on a piece of paper and turn it in and say, here. But when you read essays by other authors, by other people, and there's a lot of them in our 50 essays anthology, you see how they organized their text and how they made it so that it makes sense. And you can take what they did and use that for yourself. So there's my quote-unquote sales pitch for this class. Hopefully, it's at least gotten those of you who might not enjoy reading or who might not be super interested in this class, it's gotten you to at least think about what you can take away from this class, what you should be able to take away from this class, so that if a few weeks from now you realize that you're not taking that away, you can let me know. For those of you that like to read already, who enjoy it, there's not a lot that I feel that I need to say to you about the value of reading, or maybe there is. There's people who enjoy reading for its own sake, but it's a form of entertainment. They're not really thinking about the practical good that it's doing for them while they're reading. And it is. I think each time you read something, even if it is something, silly, like science fiction or something like that. I shouldn't say that because I like science fiction. I don't mean to talk down about it. But even if it's something that's like a story, you're taking things away from it. You're learning. So for this week, after you've watched this lecture, be sure to read the Frederick Douglass essay in 50 essays and respond to the lecture question and the prompt for writing for responses in the discussions tab underneath this one, which should be in the same module. This is UIS's first semester of using Canvas. We've used Blackboard in the past, and I'm still new to Canvas. I'm learning it as we go. It will be a learning experience for all of us. So if something's not there that should be, email me and let me know. And yeah, I think that's about it that I wanted to get across for this lecture. I am looking forward to this class. It's a little weird. It's not the usual way that we go about doing things. It's going to be strange not actually being able to have conversations with you all, being able to talk to you. But hopefully in writing, we'll be able to mitigate that somewhat. And again, if you feel that you do need to have like a face-to-face conversation or even a one-on-one conversation, you can always either email me, or if you want to meet face-to-face, we can maybe schedule a Zoom conference or things like that. Anything else? I don't think there's anything else. Okay, so have a good morning or afternoon or whenever it is that you're watching this video. And I will see everybody next week. Thank you very much.